Good morning. All right. I'd like to invite those who may be outside to come in since we're ready to start. For those of you whom I have not had the pleasure of meeting, I'm Subhi Ali, Chairman of the Jerusalem Fund and Palestine Center, and it's a pleasure to welcome every one of you here. I see some familiar faces and a lot of newcomers. It's a delight to have you at our annual conference, which has been an annual happening for many years. We have an excellent program for you today. But before I start on that, I'd like to do some few housekeeping items. First, and this is instructions from the staff, and I better do it. You know, if you have one of those that sing and music and classic music, Beethoven and stuff, please silence it. Please. I did silence mine. There will be a question and answer period after the keynote speaker. Dr. Mansour has planned for that, as well as the panels. There will be adequate time for question and answers. For the web audience, they can tweet their questions to @Palestine Center, and those on Twitter, the handle is #PCCONF2016. Again, PCCONF2016. I hope that every one of you has picked up one of these. It has the bio of every speaker that we have today, as well as some other information about our programs, and about our donors, and about our committees, and so on. I hope that nobody would leave the building without one of the programs. This year's Palestine Center Annual Conference will examine the current situation of Palestine within overlapping historical, sociological, and political context. The panelists, and every one of them is really an expert in his or her field, will examine the salient developments in the Middle East over the past century and the deep impact they have had on Palestinian national aspirations, all the way from the Sykes, I like to call it the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement, another one, the Balfour Declaration, which just had 99 years. November 2nd was the 99th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. Speakers will touch on that. And the unfortunate, now that's my editorial, British mandate to the Arab Spring. I don't know what to call it, Arab Spring, Arab Fall, Arab what. All of you are familiar with that, and it's unfulfilled promises. Experts will also offer perspectives on Washington's policy toward Israel and Palestine in light of this year's presidential election. I think all of you are aware that we've just had an election, as well as the challenges to the growing PDS, which is boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement in the United States and internationally. Today, we will open our conference with a keynote address delivered by a friend of mine for many, many years and decades, Ambassador Riyad Mansour. Dr. Riyad Mansour is the permanent observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, as well as the non-resident ambassador to Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic. He actually joined the permanent observer mission of the PLO to the United Nations, New York, in 1983 as deputy permanent observer, and has since represented Palestine in several committees and bodies of the United Nations. Dr. Mansour also has spent some time since that time in the private sector and served as an adjunct professor in the political science department of the University of Central Florida. He holds a PhD in counseling from the University of Akron, Ohio, and has published several studies and articles about the Palestinian community in the United States. I really don't know who in the United States can deliver a better perspective and so on and serve as keynote better than Dr. Mansour. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Riyad Mansour.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're okay? Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Subhi. Subhi is a good friend of mine, and I'm always, every time we meet, whether today or a few years ago or years before that, I always have a wonderful personal exchange with him as friends. And we are also have even family relations, because my nephew is married to his niece. And that sort of strengthened the relationship between us further, at the Palestinian style, when you have people, married from different families, then they tend to become even closer. So I am very delighted, to be here. I've seen also quite a few of some of my old friends. And I just want to commend you, Dr. Subhi, and your board and the organization of Jerusalem Fund for all the wonderful things that you do in advancing the cause of justice for the Palestinian people. We thank you very much for your work. And of course, we know that you will continue this course even if things become more complicated and more difficult. And I will always, support your efforts, and I will always be with you in doing whatever I can in order to allow you to accomplish your objective in the best possible way. We meet today, it's becoming like a cliche for Palestinians officials when we meet. We say that we meet at a critical time. Every time we're meeting at a critical time. Of course, next year will mark the 50th anniversary of Israeli occupation to the land of the State of Palestine, including East Jerusalem, of course. 50 years of occupation is way too long of occupation. Occupations usually are supposed to be of a temporary nature. They last for a few years, and then they should end to allow for reversing the situation to the way it was before occupation. So 50 years of occupation is way too long for the Palestinian people to endure this ruthless military system of oppression against the total population of the Palestinian people who live in the occupied territory, and for those also who live in the diaspora. And next year also, we will note 70 years of Nakba, the creation of the State of Israel and the catastrophe that the Palestinian people went through and still going through, including the millions of us who live in refugee camps, particularly in Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. And of course, at the end of next year also, we will remember with tremendous amount of pain the infamous Balfour Declaration, in which our national homeland was promised by a colonial power to address issues in Europe at the expense of the Palestinian people in one hand, and also at the expense of the Jews in Europe, instead of dealing with their tragedies in Europe on the basis of those who created those tragedies for them, to correct their conducts, including anti-Semitism in Europe, but yet they decided to expel many of them and add to their tragedies and create for us a Nakba in 1948. So it's a double whammy for us and for them. Now this is the moment or the time for us that we will be going through next year, which put us in a situation at the mission of the State of Palestine at the UN, myself and my team, to legislate few things, including authorizing the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People to conduct many activities in collaborations with UN agencies, with countries, with civil societies, with the regional organizations, to do activities with the view of ending this occupation. And the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People will do all of its activities, and all of you are invited to be involved in your own capacities, in the way that you wish to be active, under the banner of 2017 will be the International Year to End the Israeli Occupation. So this is one piece of legislation that we will adopt at the United Nations. Now, one can say that the situation of the Palestinian people is so difficult and so miserable, and it is. And occupation has been there for way, way too long. And there are walls, there are settlements, there is the isolation and the blockade, which is immoral and illegal against 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. East Jerusalem is being severed from the remaining part of the occupied Palestinian territory. Jerusalem is the heart of Palestine. So when you cut the heart from the rest of the body, the heart will not function, nor the rest of the body will be functioning. So one can say that our situation could be characterized as very miserable, very frustrating, and very difficult. But yet, we, the Palestinian people, have a certain quality about us, that we are resilient, we do not give up. We always rise up from the ashes and tend to articulate our strategies and tactics to continue the struggle. And in this connection, I can tell you that I have been personally involved for the last, I don't know how many years, in articulating a strategy to counter the Israeli strategy on the ground. Their strategy is to create illegal facts on the ground, stealing our land, building settlements. This is illegal from the point of view of international law. Unfortunately, there is no political will in the international community, particularly in the Security Council, to hold those who are violating international law and committing all these crimes accountable. Because, we have the law so that thieves to be deterred from not stealing. But yet we have the law so that if somebody tries to break that law to steal, then they will be held accountable. They go to jail. In our case, international humanitarian law, which was invented by the West, specifically the Europeans, in order to conduct their behaviors when they fight, that occupiers and occupied people to be following certain patterns of international law of civilization. So that there are things that the occupier can do and things cannot do. One of them, you cannot transfer part of your population from your land to the occupied territory to build settlements. That is illegal. They say that to us all the time in the Security Council. In fact, there is a unanimous position on the illegality of settlements. They tell us it is illegal. They tell us it is an obstacle to peace, but they don't tell us in the Security Council what are they going to do about this behavior of Israel, which is conducting itself in this manner. Meaning they tell us that we have in the books law to say that it is illegal to steal or to kill. And we know that there are killers and thieves, but they don't tell us what they are going to do with those killers and thieves when they violate the law. And here I'm referring, for example, in the case of settlements. So their strategy is to create illegal facts on the ground, illegal, and without being held accountable, because there is a powerful country, particularly in the Security Council, that is shielding them and protecting them from accountability. So they don't care what the Security Council, what the UN does, and they continue in this illegal behavior. So our strategy has been for I don't know how many years, at least for the last 5, 6 years, maybe longer. You create illegal facts on the ground. Our people are steadfasting there. They're staying on their land. They're resisting peacefully, a shining example of what our people do every week in a village by the name of Bilain, in which they struggle peacefully with pacifists from Israel, with internationals, in order to push the wall away from their land of their village and to liberate more dunums of their land, which is their land, and to push the wall to be closer to the green lines. And there are many examples of struggle of our people in the occupied territory. But in my field at the United Nations, the strategy has been, okay, you are creating illegal facts on the ground. I want to create legal, diplomatic, political facts at the international arena. And this is why we decided in 2011 and 2012 to go to the General Assembly to legislate the recognition of the State of Palestine on the borders of 1967, with East Jerusalem as its capital, and to change the status to an observer state, meaning that we resolve the issue whether the State of Palestine exists or not. So we acquired the recognition of more than 2/3 majority at the international level in the UN to recognize the State of Palestine and therefore to change the status to an observer state. That opened the door for us to join so many treaties and conventions, including the International Criminal Court. So while they are creating illegal facts on the ground, we are creating legal facts by becoming equal as a state party in so many things, like the climate change, the law of the sea, the whole package of human rights, the right of women, the right of children, the right of the disabled, and so on and so forth. They fight us, and even they accuse us of what we're doing. They call it diplomatic terrorism. And their action, which is a blunt, clear violation of the law, and they should be held accountable for it, including committing war crimes, because according to the Rome Statute of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, if you transfer part of your civilian population and plant them in the land of the occupied territory, it's a war crime. So they are committing war crimes according to the articulation of international law, and we are committing legal, civilized, peaceful action by changing our status to a state, strengthening the pillars of the state in the international arena, and creating everyday diplomatic and political realities. Sometimes they say to us, including one time Bolton said that before he was removed as an ambassador of the U.S. to the United Nations. And by the way, we hear rumors that he might be coming back again to New York. When he fights against our resolution in order to convince people not to vote in favor of these resolutions, and when he is defeated, then he says these resolutions are meaningless. They don't mean anything. They are just only ink on pieces of paper. No, they're not. Upholding international law is not a joke. It is something serious. So while we are deepening the pillars of the State of Palestine in the international arena, one might ask, what is the value of that? I can tell you the value is tremendous. Maybe for those who are not in the trenches to see the meaning and the value of the state of Palestine as a state is marching slowly in the direction of eventually Washington and Tel Aviv cannot deny the fact that we exist as a nation, we exist as a state, and the land of our state is under occupation, and it will be a matter of time before they have to accept this reality. Because when the world accepts us as a state, when the world is excited about us, when we put ballots in the boxes and we vote as a state, when the world is accepting us to be a responsible state and to elect us a vice president of this conference, a vice president of that convention, these are but small steps in the direction of saying you cannot deny our existence, you can steal part of our land, you can build more settlements, but you cannot erase the fact that the Palestinian people exist and they are recognized and welcomed by the great majority of nations as a state, and we are continuing this march. Now, in this connection, we started a process about a month and a half ago of trying to legislate something in the Security Council, particularly around settlements. Because they are telling us, as I said, in the Security Council, that settlement is illegal and the main obstacle to peace. I said, fine. If this is your position and we agree with you, tell us what you are going to do about it. They are not telling us what they want to do about it. Then we said, the Palestinian Observer is going to tell you what we are going to do about it. We are going to legislate something to that effect. And in fact, just a few days ago, we had a resolution adopted in the Fourth Committee on settlements. And for the first time, we used language of condemnation, and we used and succeeded in negotiations with the Europeans who voted, all of them unanimously in favor of that resolution, that if Israel does not abide by its obligation under international law and the provisions of the Charter with regard to settlements, then the option of considering accountability is an option to be put on the table. That is good for you, Phyllis, with regard, to BDS and other things, meaning that there is a possibility of small door to be open for sanctions, quote unquote. They are forcing us to go that route. If you are not listening to the law, you are not listening to what everybody is telling you to do, now, after a long march, particularly with the Europeans, they are accepting the concept that if you don't abide by the law, then we will be possibly entertaining the concept of accountability. Of course, they don't use sanctions. I know that this is a big word and they're afraid of it, but the march in that direction, you have to do it one step at a time, and I believe some of these steps are taking place. So it is not as gloomy as one can think, although the Israeli government is working day and night to have erosions of our position at the United Nations. They might be influencing one African country here, influencing in another place, but in general, they are not fundamentally succeeding in this arena. So that's part of our strategy as we move forward. Now, with regard to this resolution, as I said, on settlements, we had very constructive consultations with all members of the Security Council. And we gave them a sheet of paper, 1 page, that constitute the elements where we believe that should be contained in such a resolution. Of course, some of the Arabs and some in Washington, D.C., they were saying wait until the election because they were thinking that Hillary Clinton will win. And then they were insinuating that the president, before he leaves, he might put on the table a draft resolutions and parameters. So in the negotiation with them, I personally said to Samantha, we have two products for you when I went with the group of Arab ambassadors as part of our negotiation with members of the Security Council. Here we have a draft resolution on settlements. The President Barack Obama is saying that he wants to preserve the two-state solution. The main obstacle against the two-state solution is settlements. So adopting a resolution in settlements would serve his objective of trying to preserve the two-state solution. If you don't like that, we have another product for you. Okay, allow our application in the Security Council for admission as a full member of the State of Palestine to be adopted. You don't like option A, you don't like option B, tell us what you have. But if you tell us after the election you're not going to do anything, we are not going to accept that option. We're not going to accept, wait till the Trump administration to take place in January, because if we wait until that, we know that that administration will tell us, wait till we constitute ourselves, wait till we get ready, wait. The story of our life with the US administration is non-stop waiting. We're not going to wait. So it's either you put on the table something that we look at, or we are going to advance our plans for having a resolution and settlement. Of course, we send a report to the Arab foreign ministers with all the details of the position of all the 15 countries on these two drafts. And we are waiting instructions from them. And I sincerely hope that they have the guts and the spine to say, proceed with a draft resolution and settlement. And we will see. We are not looking for a veto, but we want the US administration, including President Barack Obama, before he leaves, to do something congruent with his position and what he articulates every day, that he wants to preserve the two-state solution. We think a resolution and settlement is extremely useful because Israel needs to receive a strong political message from the international community that the international community cannot continue to tolerate their intransigence and disregard to international law and to the wish of the international community. So we will see. Hopefully, soon, something will happen, and I personally sincerely hope that we can proceed in the Security Council and try to have a resolution adopted on settlements. That's on the Security Council front. If the new administration, and I hope they do not show belligerency against us, more than what we've seen, but if they want to start attacking us left and right, moving the capital to Jerusalem, and to condone settlements and what have you, then nobody should blame us from unleashing all of the weapons that we have in the United Nations to defend ourselves. And we have, believe me, a lot of weapons, and we are not a small something at the United Nations. We are a strong, well-respected, well-supported by more than 150, 160, 170 countries that vote occasionally in favor of our resolutions against a handful of countries, including Israel and the United States. And I don't want to count Micronesia and Solomon Islands and other countries that all together do not reach even the number of both of your hands. Occasionally there are 5, 2, 3, 6. Canada is among them. But of course, we hope that Canada would, change its behavior and conduct itself in a different way, and we are engaging them. And if you can also engage them by all means, and also engage the new administration not to show more of an excessive, unfair, negative position against the Palestinian people. They need to be as balanced as possible if they want to contribute to solving this conflict after 50 years of occupation, after 70 years of a Nakba. I think that they should resort into a balanced approach And by all means, we invite all of our friends who have influence with Washington or could have influence with Washington to work in this regard. For us internally, we need to put an end to our division. We need to put an end to the fact that we have Gaza and Ramallah. We need to have national unity, because national unity is in the essence of the national interest of the Palestinian people. We can disagree within the House, but we should not divide the House. We should put an end to this division. We need to have national unity. And we need, of course, to agree on details of the strategy of how we conduct ourselves as we move forward, particularly after the American elections and after we put our house in order, and also taking into account what is really happening in the Middle East. Finally, to our friends in the civil society organizations, including BDS, I think we appreciate what you do, and you are playing a very important role in complementing the struggle of the Palestinian people, whether in the ground, in the diplomatic field, in all fields. We are all complementing each other for the same objective of accomplishing the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. We will do more things in New York with the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights, with all civil society organizations, including those in the United States of America, working in all fields, including PDS. It was the Israeli ambassador who brought 1,000 Jewish American students to New York to combat PDS. When the journalist asked me, what do you think of that? I said, he is the one who is bringing this issue to the agenda of the UN, and it is not on the agenda of the UN. And I said, bring it on. So that I invite our friends in BDS and others, also civil society organizations. You are welcome to come to New York. You are welcome to organize your conferences and meetings, and we will be helping you there in order really to help the struggle of the Palestinian people to put an end to this tragedy. I think I spoke more than enough. I don't want you to be gloomy that we are helpless, we cannot do anything. We can do a lot, and we are doing a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mansour.
Mansour
Mansour has agreed to take questions, and we have actually a lot of time for questions. That's the way it was structured. So I believe that we have time for probably all the questions. I'm going to take Dr. Musa.
I'm glad you talked a lot about the settlements, but I have one questions about it. In the United States and the United States government always, as you mentioned, they said they are illegal. But the last few years, we never heard this word illegal. It's illegitimate. And I raised this up to the undersecretary in one of the meetings, and he did not answer it. And I want to know from those who are expert in English language, what's the difference and what do they mean by illegitimate, changing illegal to illegitimate?
Do you want me to take a few questions and deal with them together, or what?
It's all yours.
Okay,
This
maybe
is the
3 or
one.
4, and then I'll respond to them all
That would be
together.
good.
Okay.
If you can select some.
Make sure there is a gender balance. Don't go with all men.
All right, Phyllis? I will. Go ahead over there. We'll try to balance the 4 sections of the House here.
Thank you, Riyad. That was you raised a lot of very important questions. My question is about the relationship these days diplomatically of Palestine with the Arab governments. You mentioned going to the Arab regimes at the UN. There's been lots of changes, obviously, in the last several years of those governments. And I'm wondering if you could give us a kind of overview of where Palestine stands in terms of those governments that are trying very hard to win support in Washington, particularly.
Okay.
Okay. Young man from this section.
Thank you very much for your time, Your Excellency. I just had one
What is
question.
your name?
Durgham Abu Salim. I am with the Institute of Palestine Studies. Just one question. I know we're all talking about the new leadership here in the U.S. with President-elect Trump, but there is also new leadership coming up at the United Nations. Antonio Guterres will be the new Secretary General starting January as well. How is the Palestinian leadership feeling about any role that he might have regarding an active, more serious approach for the UN to deal with Palestine compared to, say, General Ban Ki-moon? Thank you.
Okay. Fourth question, and then we'll allow answers, please. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. My name is Ronald Wilson. I work with the United Nations High Commissioner of Refugees. And from my perspective, it seems like there's already two states that exist in Palestine. It's just that the international community might not recognize it, but I do believe that you're in the same position as formerly South Africa was under apartheid, and also India under the British rule. And I think that regardless who does or does not recognize you, you do exist. And if you exert your dominion as a sovereign nation externally to other nations with ambassadorships, I think in due time that cloud, that colonialism that's dominating you will break, and it will also have to subside.
Okay, these are four excellent questions. Dr. Mansour, you want to tackle these before we go to the next round?
Okay. Dr. Musa asked about, this linguistic question. Dr. Musa asked the question, the linguistic questions, the difference between illegal and illegitimate. I don't claim that I am like Edward Said, who was a linguistic professor, of contemporary languages at Columbia University. But I think that this new language used by the United States was relatively new. They are in the records that have voted in resolutions related to illegality of settlement activities. And I believe that, of course, 14 members of the Security Council, they use the language illegal. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Ban Ki-moon, and the new Secretary General-elect, Antonio Guterres, also use illegal. We are not yet at the final language of the text. What we need from the United States of America is to accept the concept that the Security Council has a role to play, and it has to legislate a new resolution on settlements. If they are on board, then we will begin the exercise of the language. But yet we need to get commitment from them that, yes, they will allow the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility and adopt a resolution there. In Arabic, for example, if you translate both of them, they amount into the same thing. Perhaps maybe in other languages, but in English, it appears that there are differences. They are too close to each other, but I don't think that they are synonymous with each other. But again, as I said, that there is no need for us to engage in a linguistic discussion. We need to reach the moment of a political decision. Yes, the Security Council has a role to play, and it has to legislate a resolution to deter Israel from continuing on this path, and that's part of the consequences of Israel continuing this illegal behavior. And if we are all on board, including the United States of America, then we need to find the appropriate language that would address that issue. Phyllis, you put your finger on something very important. We wanted, as Palestine, to go to the Security Council from the beginning of the year on the question of settlements. And in fact, I have a very, very tedious exercise through the Council of Arab Ambassadors to move in that direction. Some of them sometimes use big language, but they have not necessarily kosher intentions. Like saying that we had resolutions in the past on settlement that are so powerful, so strong,
Why do we need to have a diluted new resolution? Okay? But the essence of that argument is don't go to the Security Council on settlements. Of course, the fact that we had a resolution, let's say in 1980, that called even for dismantling the settlements and having, a reporting mechanism to the Security Council, to the fact that we had that strong resolution, does this mean that we should not go back to the Security Council to have a resolution in settlements? I don't believe that. We have to go always to the Security Council to shoulder its responsibility to put Israel in the corner with regard to this illegal behavior, with a view that this illegal behavior has to stop. Because we cannot have opening doors for peace as long as this illegal behavior continues to exhibit itself. And, Ronald said, that we could be moving into a situation similar to South Africa. Those who are continuing this illegal behavior in settlements are creating the one-state reality with two political systems, which is apartheid. And that has been acknowledged by many, including the Secretary General of the UN, Mladenov, his special representative, even in the White House and in Washington, D.C., in their defense to Israel, they are saying that the path that you continue on one-state reality, you are destroying the dream of Zionism, of having a state that is Jewish or a Jewish state. So therefore, the Arabs, at that time, some of them used that argument. Others used the argument, we don't want to have a veto. What is the value of a veto? As if, we are the ones who decide whether a veto will be casted or not. We will negotiate in good faith. We will use all the possible arguments to convince the United States of America to be on board and to legislate. But at the end of the day, the United States is responsible for its action, whether it will allow a resolution to be adopted or obstruct it. If they obstruct it, they should be held responsible for their obstructionist policy inside the Security Council. Now, then I floated a draft resolution in March, and they said we cannot proceed until we get authorization from the Arab Ministerial Committee. There is a small Arab Ministerial Committee. And that Arab Ministerial Committee did not meet for 6 months to consider the issue. And then when we made a huge stink in September over this issue, they met, they authorized us to begin the consultation as Council of Arab Ambassadors. Now, why are the Arabs behaving this way, or some of the Arab countries? They are our brothers. We appreciate their help. We belong to that group, and they are, our strategic, depth. And of course, the Arabs are, if they are unified to a certain extent on any issue, they are unified on the question of Palestine. But they exhibit this behavior because there are those among them, they think that if we go to the Security Council in the current conditions and push the United States and they use a veto in the environment of the Russians using vetoes versus Syria, then from their perspective, as it relates to the issues as they relate to Syria or Iran, then that is important to them. And unfortunately, when they think a lot that way, in certain ways, it is at the expense of the Palestine question. Now here we go again, that they were also floating an idea that after the election, and when Hillary Clinton wins, then President Barack Obama will put something more important than settlement parameters. I think that reality is not with us anymore. There is going to be a new person in the White House. It's not Hillary Clinton. Now, what will President Barack Obama do before he leaves? Will he allow something to be put on the table? I think that if we do not work hard, if we do not continue with the momentum that we generated, not only through the consultation, but we had a very important meeting under what's called as the ARIA formula, which is an open meeting, unofficial open meeting for the Security Council, in which they bring experts. And they brought among the experts 2 very important individuals, one from B'Tselem, and the other one is from Washington, D.C., from American Peace Now. Both of them said very clearly to the Security Council, you have to act. Settlements are illegal, you have to act to stop it. And occupation has to end. The Israeli ambassador made a statement that the head of B'Tselem, who participated, is engaging in diplomatic terrorism. And they are now trying to have a piece of legislation in the Knesset to deprive him of his Israeli citizenship. You're talking about fascism, you're talking about crazy things. Those cannot even tolerate a Jew, Israeli, to disagree with them on this issue, and they are entertaining the idea of taking their citizenship away from them. With all fairness, the US representative in both, in the area formula and in the open debate, defended B'Tselem and defended the lady from American Peace Now, and in the two occasions. But will that mean that the United States of America will allow the Security Council to legislate something on settlements is remain to be seen. So the issue with my brother, the Arabs, is not easy. They are fixated on other issues: Iran, Syria, Yemen, and by a derivative of that, that the Palestine question is in the back burner. For me, I have always to keep the Palestine question alive. Front burner, middle burner, I have to keep it alive at the United Nations. And we created this momentum, as I said, during the course of month of October. We need to continue with it and not to accept a new form of delay that let's wait until the new administration takes place in Washington, D.C. We cannot wait. We need to act, and we need to act now, as the representative of B'Tselem said to the members of the Security Council. Now, with regard to Guterres, Antonio Guterres is a very, very smart diplomat, and he worked for the UN for a long period of time. Very, very smart, very quick in his feet. He was the Prime Minister of Portugal. He speaks many languages. In fact, I was in a meeting with all ambassadors at the UN, and they were asking questions, including, of course, Palestine spoke and asked questions, and he was answering in English, in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, very fluent in all these languages. And he was quick, understanding the essence of every question, responding to the essence of every question in a very concise way. And although I spoke at the end, and I was frustrated when I spoke at 75, because I'm an observer. I said I speak at the end. When will I speak? Free at last, free at last. You remember the famous, speech of Martin Luther King? I'm frustrated. I don't want to keep speaking at the end. And then I said, what are you going to do differently than other SGs to see the end of occupation, the independence of the State of Palestine, and therefore saving the two-state solution? And he said, in front of everyone, that nothing will give me more pleasure than celebrating the moment to see the independence of the State of Palestine and to see the State of Palestine and Israel living in peace and security next to each other. I invited him, of course, to Palestine, and he will visit us hopefully soon, next year. And let's hope that in his time watch, we'll see something good happening to Palestine. And with regard to apartheid in Palestine, of course, President Carter wrote a famous book in that connection. One-state solution, the extremists in Israel, they keep pushing for one-state reality, then they are bringing with it the virus of apartheid. So if this is if they think that apartheid in our area will survive, they need to think again. It did not survive in South Africa. I don't think it can survive in Palestine, Israel.
Okay, we're going to go for another
Round.
Mr. Hishman. John?
I'm sorry. You had a very good statement here today. I'm wondering why our position is not well explained to Americans. Is it a question of the media? Of course, the media is not very friendly. I understand that. I'm a media person. Why don't we resort to the obvious way of doing it, which is advertising? As you well know, in the last 2 months, the Israeli side had 8 full pages in the New York Times. Is it too expensive for you or the Arab governments to put a full-page ad just to cover your remarks today? Highlight them. You are an excellent speaker and an excellent spokesman. I've heard a lot about you. But we need to get the American public aware of what's going on, especially now we get a very right-wing regime in this country.
I'm trying to put, an op-ed article in the New York Times. If I succeed, I'll send you a copy.
Don't resort to an op-ed article. What about a full-page ad? Put the article in the money, I know. Well, I'll tell you what, I have a follow-up. We can campaign for financial support for a full-page article.
Okay.
All right. We're going to have a question from there, and then we'll move to this side. Yes, sir.
What about the gender balance? I see, 1, 2.
I'm just answering the...
Mr. Ambassador.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Mark Harrison with the United Methodist Church office in Washington. During the anti-apartheid era, which I was greatly involved in, the UN had these conferences, mainly pushed by African governments, on ending apartheid and white majority rule. What do you think of the Committee for the Inalienable Rights of Palestine to have an international conference during the 50th year of the occupation and bring international NGOs and others together? And I know that the UN always says they have regional conferences on this issue, but there needs to be, do you think of the need for an international conference in solidarity?
Okay.
All right.
There are 2 ladies, I saw. 1
There
and
we
2.
are. You're on.
Thank you so much for being here and for... Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for being here and for your talk. My name is Marion Aboud. I'm from Georgetown University and also running a startup called Build Palestine, which I can tell you all about later. I wanted to ask you about, you talked about the weapons that we have in the UN. In working with a lot of young Palestinian activists, there is a bit of a disillusionment with the UN structure, feeling that because of the way the Security Council has the veto power, because of US's inability to make any progress in its decision making, we'll never be able to push these kinds of fantastic resolutions forward. So what are those weapons that we have if the US pushes back and we can't push this resolution forward with the veto?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kilani, and then we will also take a 5th question from the left.
I'm Walid Kailani, board member of the Jerusalem Fund. Today, Donald Trump said that he is going to move the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. I would like your views on what impact that would do and what can be done.
Okay. Last question of this round. The young lady on the left.
Yes. My name is Nini Sharikin. I came from Houghton, Michigan, just to attend this. I am passionate about Palestinian issues. Okay. I would like to know what Ambassador Riyad said, those secret weapons, because why have they not been used before? Because we are really desperate right now. And then also, from year to year, I always attended this National Council U.S. Arab Relations Conference in October. And when I hear, for example, Prince Turki bin Faisal talking about Palestine, really, it was heartwarming. But I'm afraid, so far from year to year, we are just talking. And now 2 administrations have gone by Obama, so nothing is materialized. So what I would like to know is about this Arab government, because we know also at the same time that a few countries like UAE, Qatar, they have relationship with Israel under the table. And also, yesterday I read that Donald Trump said that settlements are not an obstacle. So could you respond to all of that? Thank you.
Thank you. These are 5 excellent questions. Dr. Mansour?
Okay. Okay, with regard to the question asked by my friend Heshme, if there are those who think that advertising is a good thing to do, to put in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, and you have the resources, by all means, please do it. Now, for us, we do things, as we fight at the United Nations, people listen to us, people vote in favor of our resolutions, and we organize conferences and meetings, and we do things in order to articulate our position. Of course, we cannot publish our position everywhere. That's why we rely on friends like you and others to also, to do some of that work, and maybe good campaigns of to have one-page advertisement of anything that you wish, and if you want help from us in terms of articulating the message, we'll be more than delighted to do so. But I think that there is a tremendous amount of opportunity for all those who want to work. Why are you here this morning, all of you in this large number? Because you want to do something, you're eager to do something, and this is a wonderful spirit, and you can do whatever you think it's a good idea. Get the people who believe in that idea and try to make it a reality. I think it could be done. But as I said to you, from our side, we try to sometimes publish op-ed, whatever we can, or interviews, in order to convey our message to the largest number of audience that we can reach. The gentleman back there is Mark Harrison, I believe, from the Methodist. We are on the same wavelength. We had a retreat for the Bureau of the Palestine Committee and the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. We are planning to organize for civil societies, activists, whomever, a big international conference as we used to do in the old days. And we are thinking of doing it in June to mark the 50th anniversary. You're all invited, you, your friends. The Methodists are very good and active friends. We have good relationship with them in New York City. But the activity is not only in New York, which we are intending to do, but organize as many activities in Washington, in Chicago, in San Francisco, in all the cities, everywhere. Try, to mobilize all of your friends, all the organizations, to do as many activities as possible in the year 2017, which will be the international year to end the Israeli occupation. But from the point of view of the Palestine Committee at the UN, we are going to have an international conference in June to commemorate that occasion. With regard to the disillusionment of some young Palestinians, I can understand that. When you are young, you tend to be more radical. I was young and I was super radical when I was young, And when you get older, you try, to balance between the heart and the brain. And I think Churchill was right when he said that when you are young, you have to think from your heart, and when you are old, you have to think from your brain. I think that I'm trying to use both of them, trying to balance that. Of course, the young, they want more things, and it is good to have them. It is good that they push, and they push, and they push more. They keep us on the right track if we try to be complacent and not to try as hard as we should. And I am delighted that more than half of my team are young, and I always tell them, challenge me, don't disagree with me. That doesn't mean that I will agree with your articulation, but always don't be afraid to say what you believe in, because this is how we can take into account all positions and opinions, and therefore serve Palestine in the best possible way, as we should serve Palestine in the best possible way, because it's a noble cause. Now, have we used these weapons? I just gave you an example of our strategy, and we in New York, myself and my team, we were able to influence the leadership thinking to push for that direction. I was a junior, young, very radical diplomat in 1988 when we declared independence. I pushed for doing what we did in 2012. I was leading a minority faction then at 1988. And because I felt when we declared independence in 1988, we could have gone directly to the General Assembly to change our status. Unfortunately, I was overruled because I was among the minority. When I came back in 2005 as an ambassador, that was one of the issues in my head. And we were able to articulate the strategy that the leadership accepted, promoted, and worked for it, and it was culminated in the historic resolution adopted in 29 November 2012, in which the General Assembly recognized the state and changed the status. Now, what are some of these potent weapons? From 2012 now, when you see that Palestine is a state party equal to all other states in all these treaties and conventions, this is part of that weapon. And even, you know, when I go to conferences in which we have to sit in alphabetical order, they're used to us to sit in the back as observers. And often habits with the organizer of conferences, Palestine or the State of Palestine, they sit in the back. I said, no, this conference is all state formula. I sit in alphabetical order. Then, you know, I train my team, open your eyes. Every conference you go to, potentially they could make these mistakes, correct the mistakes. Go outside the building, see if our flag is out or not. If our flag is at the end, make sure that to tell the organizer it should be in alphabetical order. I was in a meeting in Addis Ababa. I went outside and our flag was at the end. I said, I am calling Ban Ki-moon now. Who is in charge? They were terrified. They said, we made a mistake, the protocol. I said, I need it to be corrected. They said, at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, it will be corrected. I was there at 8 o'clock in the morning with my camera, just to make sure that they correct it. Now, of course, people do not see these things, but these are remarkable things. When you see that the flag of Palestine, as we legislated that and implemented that last year, to be flying in front of the UN, it's inspiring to me and to my team and to all those who come and visit. These are the kind of things that we do. Now, I said that we are using peaceful, diplomatic, legal, civilized methods. But if people attack us by trying to move Jerusalem, the embassy to Jerusalem, which is violation of Security Council resolution. It is violation of Resolution 181, which was drafted by the United States of America. So if the US administration wants to violate the legal things that they were leaders in legislating, it means that they are showing belligerency against us. Then, you know, what do you expect from me? Just to accept it peacefully? No. What can I do? Maybe I cannot have resolutions in the Security Council, but I can make their life miserable every day, precipitating a veto on my admission as a member state. Italy, for example, in 1949, received 3 consecutive vetoes in their admission to the United Nations from the Soviet Union. The United States would come today, we are putting the application of Italy for admission. The Soviet Union would cast a veto. The following day, the United States, we are submitting the application. The Soviet Union would do a veto. If they are going to do these things, these are the kind of things that I can do. You show belligerency against me, then I will do the things that I can. I can have emergency meetings in the Security Council. I can reopen the whole Pandora box about the ruling of the ICJ on the wall, with all of its regimes and settlements. So I'll do what I can do. I do it legally. They do illegal things, because it is illegal to defy a Security Council resolution. The United States is party to it, saying that the unilateral action of Israel of annexing East Jerusalem is illegal and it is null and void without legal ramifications. That is international law. If the US administration wants to defy international law, they are doing something illegal. My retaliation will be legal. I hope we do not see that reality, because many candidates during the election promised a similar promise, but they did not implement it. Because what you do when you are campaigning is something, but when you deal with the legal things is something else. We sincerely hope they don't go that route. We sincerely hope they don't do that. And we sincerely hope They don't move from illegal to illegitimate to it is not an obstacle, you know, or it is not. It's not an obstacle to peace, which is the Israeli language. If the U.S. administration, as the young lady who came from Michigan, and we thank you for coming from Michigan to Washington for this conference, if she thinks that, you know, okay, now that they're going to say in essence that settlements are condoned, that's another violation of international law. We hope they don't do that. We hope that this is just only talk. But if they want to go the path of trying, you know, to act illegally, nobody should blame us for defending ourselves legally. And that's what I meant by this, you know, the potent weapons that we have. Maybe the young might say, well, this is only a resolution. As one time I was interviewed by Al Jazeera, and he was asking me, what are you doing at the UN? I said, I explained what I was doing. Then he said, well, all these are resolutions that are meaningless. I said, I don't think they are meaningless. I'll give you an example. When we legislate resolutions every time, for example, for the mandate of UNRWA, and for making this organization that looks after the Palestine refugees, in which it spends more than $1 billion annually to educate more than 500,000 Palestinian children, and to provide some health care for the Palestine refugees, and in the social services, to me, this is important. He screamed at me. He said, I don't care who eats and who goes to get educated. Did you liberate Palestine? I said, no, I did not liberate Palestine. I am doing my duty, but I'm doing useful things that would allow us, for example, UNRWA. If it wasn't for UNRWA, we would not have been having the contemporary Palestinian national movement, because it came from the refugee camps. And we are grateful to UNRWA for doing all these things. Now, when I negotiate with the Europeans and my team language to try to stabilize the financial situation of UNRWA, and we succeeded in some language to that effect, and maybe to have portion of UNRWA budget as part of the permanent budget of the UN, and not to keep it, you know, at the mercy of voluntary contribution. I think that this is a valuable contribution in a concrete way to the struggle of the Palestinian people. These are the things that we do. If some of the young people see it's irrelevant, it's too bad, but this is important thing that we need to do it. It is the responsible thing to do in order really to try to minimize the pain of our people while we are steadfasting and continuing the struggle until we succeed in putting an end to the occupation and accomplishing the attainment of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. I think it's valuable.
Ambassador, if I may just interject here very quickly on the same topic.
Sure. We have
is
other.
Is for peace resolution possible as a weapon for those things?
Sir, let's stay focused. There are other questions. One more question, and then we have a staff is nudging me over there. Otherwise, we'll be here all day.
Shall we have the last round, I think?
No, we don't really have time for it. Did you want to say anything?
How about the Arab governments that play under the table?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, no, I wrote it down, okay.
And then we have a break.
Listen, you know, it's not our job to add more misery to our people and to have more problems and to invite more enemies. We are part of the Arab nations. We know how some of them think because they have their own calculations, including those who might think that they are in the same camp with Israel, objectively speaking, not intentionally speaking, because they are afraid of Iran, for example, in the region. So they justify some of these activities based on that. Of course, as I said, this tends to push our question into the back burner. That doesn't mean that, you know, they are becoming, you know, our enemies, those Arab countries. We don't look for enemies. We have a formidable enemy supported by a superpower, the United States of America. That is more than enough to handle. So we are in the business of always trying to have more friends. Even we will accept half a friend better than nothing. Because, you know, this is our responsibility in defending the rights and minimizing the pain of our people. And that is a responsible way of being a leader in looking for ways to minimize the pain of your people and to maximize the gains. Again, thank you very much. And good luck in the remaining part of the conference.
Well, thank you very much. We have two panels and we need to stay on time.